Claire. Let's speak to Baroness Claire Fox right now. Hello, good afternoon, Claire. How are you?
Good afternoon.
Right, now, we sat by each other, didn't we? Shoulder to shoulder in the European Parliament, trying to get ourselves out of Brussels. Arguably, we sort of got out on paper only and no one really did anything about it. And what was it all for? Because it was always predictable, wasn't it? That roll the clock forward and you get a Labour government and they're going to try and reverse all of it. And here we go. He's having a little tete-a-tete with Emmanuel Macron in Armenia when various leaders of European countries are meeting up to decide whether they can give a £79 billion loan to Ukraine. But no. Starmer wants to have a chat with France about following the single market rules, and it's going to cost us £1 billion a year. Oh.
Well, it is predictable, but it's also shocking, despite that, because here we are. Starmer is facing an existential attack on the Labour Party, the collapse of the traditional Labour Party in local elections. And what has Starmer done? He's got on a plane to go to an EU summit. I mean, where he feels most at home. And so off he is, chatting with Macron. I mean, you can feel it's his whole comfort zone selling out British sovereignty. But why we should, despite everything, despite how predictable it is, we still should say, oh my God, they're just overturning a democratic decision behind our backs. I mean, it still should be something which really infuriates people. And I don't care whether the application of Brexit has been disappointing and not seen through and all the rest of it. It's the brazen way that the decisions of the British people don't count. Even at the last general election, in which Labour, got that enormous majority, even if not the enthusiasm of the British people, he promised that he would not undo Brexit. He even brought out a policy document called Taking Back Control. I mean, the nerve of the man. And then, just very quietly, just says, oh, yeah, but we've changed our mind on that, and it's going to cost you a lot of money. And I do think that people should be outraged by his... I mean, this is genuinely, properly deceiving the British people. This is basically this isn't any old U-turn. This is, oh, by the way, we're no longer going to make our own laws. We're going to allow them to be made by someone else. I don't often quote Priti Patel, but I did like her, what did you call it? Unpicking Brexit, an undemocratic hit job, and it's absolutely true.
This is the thing, though, because the argument was, well, businesses, they're going to have to adapt. They don't know what's going on anymore. What sort of Brexit deal is it going to be? We don't even know what rules we're going to have to follow in the future. We know that the application of EU regulation potentially cost the UK economy £10 to £15 billion in all the red tape. This is now following legislation dynamically that we're not making, and so the minute a business thinks, right, this is what I'm going to have to do to comply to this regulation, that they could change their mind in Brussels. They will have no say, and all of a sudden it's like, right, you've now got to make this widget, or the bendy banana stuff, basically, to this particular construct. And I wonder how if we now start following all of these EU regulations again, how that's going to impact upon the trade deals. And some of the trade deals we've done, such as TTIP and all the rest of it, have been extremely beneficial to the UK. What's it going to do to the fact that we aren't having to pay astronomical tariffs to trade with America, who's our biggest trading partner? All of the, we scrambled and worked so hard to start trading with the rest of the world, and that stuff will surely end up in tatters on the floor.
But also, UK, absolutely true, but also about the only dynamic, new, innovative industry that the UK has created recently is in relation to genetic technology. There's quite a lot of innovation going on there. There's quite a lot of new, exciting changes, and literally the gene editing law post-Brexit, the liberalisation of that allowed a new industry to grow up. Yeah. And that industry will be thwarted by these rules. But I just think about the other stuff. There you are, a British farmer creating food for British citizens. You're not even exporting it anywhere, right? You're not, and it's being bought by British supermarkets, sold to British people. But you will now have to comply with EU rules. EU officials could turn up at your farm or at the supermarket to inspect whether it complies with EU laws. And for that, we have to pay 1 billion a year, and we even have to pay for hosting the EU officials who are coming to do the inspections. Take it up. I mean, absolutely. So it's not just about our trading relationships. That's what I'm saying. It will have an impact on what happens in relation to the decisions we make. And you're absolutely right. They can change their mind on what their particular carbon trading, electricity rules are, or their food rules are. They change their mind, undemocratically decided, by the way, in Brussels or in Strasbourg. And then we have to change, cut and paste our laws exactly. And by the way, this is happening without any parliamentary scrutiny. I mean, I know that because I'm a parliamentarian, I notice parliamentary democracy more than popular democracy, or as much as. But I mean, it is incredible, isn't it? Because this all happens. British Parliament doesn't get a say. Therefore, the British people don't get a say. Therefore, it's completely out of our control. And I mean, it's, as I say, we should be shocked. And I think even the people who have lost faith in Brexit, or those people who voted Remain and say, well, we always knew, should at least acknowledge that this is a power grab away from ordinary people having any control at all over the laws and decision making in this country. And that in and of itself should be enough to give you at least pause, point a finger at Starmer and say, just because you can't run this country doesn't mean you can hand our country over to a foreign power. And then, you know, it's like paying, what was that thing that we used to pay? It's like Britain being needy, and then handing over kind of money to the Emperor von der Leyen, you know.
It's like having Stockholm syndrome, I think. The other thing, Claire, that I think that, you know, people seem to miss in all of this is we know how vindictive the EU are. One of the reasons the EU wanted to keep us as closely in orbit as possible is because they didn't want to see Singapore on Thames. They didn't want to see us undercut their stagnant, behemoth, bureaucratic, failing project. And I have no doubt that if we start saying to the EU, we'll follow your rules dynamically, they will come up with rules deliberately to kneecap specific industries in the UK, because they've made no pretense of the fact that they want to punish us for Brexit. And particularly when you look at some of our biggest opportunities for growth markets, AI, Benedict and I were discussing this earlier, the EU have basically regulated AI into non-existence on the European continent. There's a reason why there are no big dot-com companies. We've already seen the impact of that when we were supposed to have this big AI data centre up in the north of England. Guess what? Now we don't. Yes, energy bills, yes, planning rules, but also because of the EU's copyright directive. It wouldn't work, so we've still got to follow it. And that's the thing. I have no doubt that Europe will be rubbing their hands together with glee going, right, now how can we make an example of Britain by regulating them in such a way that they will never be able to grow and prosper without us?
Well, vindictive they might be, but they're also, at this level, predictable. So this is the thing that's really hilarious, is Starmer is apparently shocked at this £1 billion demand, because when he had a chat with them in May, they never mentioned it. And you think, have you learned nothing at all? They never mention it, right? That's what happens. I mean, they say, sign this agreement. Look at what they've done in relation to youth mobility. They basically say, oh, well, we'll go for this Erasmus Plus, which is costing a fortune and entirely unnecessary and not what the country needs. But the main thing is that they then say, oh, yeah, and any European students who come and study in the UK will only pay the same as UK students, i.e. there'll be no distinction. That means that UK universities are now going to lose out on a lucrative form of income, right? And this was never mentioned, of course, when they first had their chat about Erasmus. So they're vindictive, but they're also, they're used to having authoritarian dictatorial powers in which they can boss people around regardless of their sovereign interests. And we took a decision as a nation in a huge, the largest democratic decision ever taken, not to be dictated by them. Not that that would make us have a perfect country, but it would mean that we could make the decisions and be accountable. The politicians could be accountable for those decisions. Now, what our politicians will say is, oh, well, we have to do this in order to have closer alignment with the EU to reset our wonderful relationship with, by the way, the dynamic EU. Are you kidding me? I mean, Nick Clegg, I mean, can you imagine this? Leading Remainer supporter Nick Clegg of Lib Dem fame and big tech fame has just said that the EU is a catastrophe, right?
No, he hasn't. Has he?
He says, quote, the EU is in terminal decline. He said that last week, right? The reason for it was it's over bureaucratic. It's too slow at decision making. It doesn't, and you think, oh, well done.
So he goes to America, works in the real world in big tech for a moment, and they have him there because they think this is the best man to sort of interlocute with Brussels. And suddenly wakes up, smells the coffee, and is no longer wearing his yellow, get us back in T-shirt and gone, oh yeah, I get it now. Oh, now I've lived in the real world. Maybe I'm also a Brexiteer. You couldn't make it up, could you?
I know. And the final thing on this is just that each country within the EU is doing really badly. The engine of Europe, Germany, in absolute decline. I mean, it's also the case that it's very appropriate for Starmer to go and have a chat with Macron because they can compare how unpopular they are amongst their own country folk. I mean, the idea that Macron represents a dynamic France, everybody in France hates Macron, right? They can't wait to see the back of him. Yeah. And the same with Starmer here. So they might feel safe and cozy chatting to each other about how to screw over the democratic demands of ordinary people. But actually, they are kidding themselves and at our expense. And I suppose that's really where we should end up, because these local elections matter. And Starmer might feel as though he's got some power, even though the power is going to cost him a lot of money, cost us, taxpayers, ordinary people, $1 billion a year, by going over and negotiating with the EU on any deal whatsoever. But actually, when he comes home, the reality is he's fighting for his political life. And his party has been decimated and destroyed by his government absolutely ruining so many aspects of his country and betraying the promises they made at the last general election only a couple of years ago. So the idea that he can strut around the international stage and feel good about himself should not fool us into believing that this pro-EU deal is going to save his skin. It won't.
No, fingers crossed, Claire. It will do quite the opposite. Baroness Claire Fox, independent peer and director of the Academy of Ideas.